agency, a number of gaudily bedecked bucks and squaws rode out to meet us. The arrival of the herd had been expected for several weeks, and our approach was a delight to the Indians, who were flocking to the agency from the nearest villages. Physically, they were fine specimens of the aborigines, but our Spanish, which Quarternight and I tried on them, was as unintelligible to them as their guttural gibberish was to us. Lovell and the agent, with a detachment of the cavalry, met us about a mile from the agency buildings, and we were ordered to cut out the cows. The herd had been grazed to contentment, and were accordingly rounded in, and the task begun at once. Our entire outfit were turned into the herd to do the work, while an abundance of troopers held the herd and looked after the cut. It took about an hour and a half, during which time we worked like Trojans. Cavalrymen several times attempted to assist us, but their horses were no match for ours in the work. A cow can turn on much less space than a cavalry horse, and except for the amusement they afforded, the military were of very little effect. After we had retrimmed the cut, the beeves were started for their pasture, and nothing now remained but the counting to complete the receiving. 4 of us remained behind with the cows, but for over 2 hours the steers were in plain sight, while the 2 parties were endeavoring to make a count. How many times they recounted them before agreeing on the numbers, I do not know, for the 4 of us left with the cows became occupied by a controversy over the sex of a young Indian, a Blackfoot, riding a cream-colored pony. The controversy originated between Fox Quarternight and Bob Blades, who had discovered this swell among a band who had just ridden in from the west, and John Officer and myself were appealed to for our opinion. The Indian was pointed out to us across the herd, easily distinguished by beads and beaver fur trimmings in the hair, so we rode around to pass our judgment as experts on the beauty. The young Indian was not over 16 years of age, with remarkable features, from which every trace of the aborigine seemed to be eliminated. Officer and myself were in a quandary, for we felt perfectly competent when appealed to for opinions on such a delicate subject, and we made every endeavor to open a conversation by signs and speech, but the young Blackfoot paid no attention to us, being intent upon watching the cows. The neatly moccasined feet and the shapely hand, however, indicated the feminine, and when Blades and Quarternight rode up, we rendered our decision accordingly. Blades took exception to the decision and rode alongside the young Indian, pretending to admire the long plaits of hair, toyed with the beads, pinched and patted the young Blackfoot, and finally, although the rest of us, for fear the Indian might take offense and raise trouble, pleaded with him to desist, he called the youth his squaw, when the young blood, evidently understanding the appellation, relaxed into a broad smile and in fair English said, "Me buck." Blades burst into a loud laugh at his success, at which the Indian smiled but accepted a cigarette, and the 2 cronied together while we rode away to look after our cows. The outfit returned shortly afterwards, when the Rebel rode up to me and expressed himself rather profanely at the inability of the government's representatives to count cattle in the Texas fashion. On the arrival of the agent and others, the cows were brought around, and these being much more gentle, and being under Lovell's instruction, fed between the counters in the narrowest file possible, a satisfactory count was agreed upon at the first trial. The troopers took charge of the cows after counting, and, our work over, we galloped away to the wagon, hilarious and carefree. McCann had camped on the nearest water to the agency, and after dinner we caught out the top horses and, dressed in our best, rode into the agency proper. There was quite a group of houses for the attaches, one large general warehouse, and several school and chapel buildings. I again met the old padre, who showed us over the place. One could not help being favorably impressed with the general neatness and cleanliness of the place. In answer to our questions, the priest informed us that he had mastered the Indian language early in his work, and had adopted it in his ministry, the better to effect the object of his mission. There was something touching in the zeal of this devoted padre, in his work amongst the tribe, and the recognition of the government had come as a fitting climax to his work and devotion. As we rode away from the agencies, the cows being in sight under herd of a dozen soldiers, several of us rode out to them and learned that they intended to corral the cows at night and within a week distribute them to Indian families when the troops expected to return to Fort Benton. Lovell and Flood appeared at the camp about dusk, Lovell in high spirits. This, he said, was the easiest delivery of the 3 herds which he had driven that year. He was justified in feeling well over the year's drive, for he had in his possession a voucher for a Circle Dots which would crowd 6 figures closely. It was a gay night with us, for man and horse were free, and as we made down our beds, old man Don insisted that Flood and he should make theirs down alongside ours. He and The Rebel had been joking each other during the evening, and as we went to bed were taking an occasional fling at one another as the opportunity offered. "It's a strange thing to me," said Lovell, as he was pulling off his boots, "that this herd counted out 112 head more than we started with, while Bob Quirk's head was only 81 long at the final count." "Well, you see," replied The Rebel, "Quirk's was a steer herd, while ours had over 1,000 cows in it, and you must make allowances for some of them to calve on the way. That ought to be easy figuring for a foxy, long-headed Yank like you." End of chapter 23.